Welcome to Uninvited, a show where we cover news that matters to Ontario women. In this episode, we shine a light on a mother and advocate from Ontario, calling out the provincial government, who she says is failing when it comes to education and safe school reopenings. We're also going to hear from you on your frustrations, what's bringing you joy, and everything in between. Completely unfiltered in a segment we call I'm Speaking. But first, here are some recent headlines impacting you. Okay, so there's more than 2 million public school students in Ontario. Many are returning to in-class learning this coming school year. It's being met with a wave of worry from parents, students, and advocates. The Toronto District School Board is Canada's largest district, and an overwhelming majority of their students will be returning to in-class learning this coming fall. 86% of students in Toronto opted to head back to class after the province gave them the option between virtual at-home learning or in-person learning earlier this summer. We'll have more on that later. Ontario is finally introducing vaccine passports, meaning the province will require proof of vaccination to enter restaurants, bars, gyms, and theaters. Premier Doug Ford says this is a plan to avoid more lockdowns. Ford went on to say that he wants kids in school and businesses to stay open. Despite calling vaccination passports divisive for most of the summer, following the Premier's announcement, vaccination rates nearly doubled in the province, jumping from about 3,500 booked the day before vaccine passports were announced to 7,100 the next day. That's a sign the policy might be working. The province says the new vaccination certification program begins September the 22nd. But not everyone in the province is welcoming these passports. There have been protests throughout Ontario. Protesters taking to the streets to condemn the new regulations, vaccinations, and even to condemn healthcare workers. When female workers make up 80% of Canada's healthcare workforce, protests are directly impacting women, their safety, and their well-being. Not to mention the fact that throughout the pandemic, experts found that female healthcare workers are at a higher risk of burnout. According to a University of Toronto study conducted last June, it found that healthcare workers are vulnerable to increased stress, burnout, and depression during a pandemic, which can then lead to substance abuse and suicidal thoughts. Recent reports show that COVID-19 has socially, psychologically, and economically affected women because of their primary caregiving roles as parents and family caregivers. Vaccine protests also threaten some of the most vulnerable. When they gather outside hospitals to protest essential workers doing their jobs, they threaten and delay them from delivering care to sick patients. Ever since the U.S. President Joe Biden announced the country would be ending America's longest war and withdrawing troops from Afghanistan, many have asked what this will mean for women in the region with the Taliban gaining power. For example, will they be able to study and work freely? Last month, CBC's Neat Koksal spoke to Fazia Kufi. She's a women's rights activist, a former Afghan MP, and was part of a delegation that was trying to negotiate peace with the Taliban. Kufi says the withdrawal has put Afghanistan in pure chaos. Afghan women's rights activist Mahbouba Siraj says that Afghan women and girls have been sold out. Siraj returned to Afghanistan nearly 20 years ago to be a voice for the voiceless. She says women in the region are in dire need of help due to poverty, lack of education, and illness. Mahbouba is in Kabul. She says she'll stay because her presence gives women the support they need during these difficult times. Amna Nawaz is the founder and the executive director of Learn, a nonprofit that ensures women and girls have access to education in Afghanistan. Recently, she was on PBS where she spoke about public spaces shrinking for women, and she's encouraging allies across the world to continue to monitor the situation without turning a blind eye. Instead, world leaders have to follow up with how women continue to be impacted. She also says people should be able to flee with more dignity, and that leaders in Western countries should use their leverage to make sure women are safe. Here at home, the organization Canadian Women for Afghanistan Women is calling on Canadians to contact the federal government to urge them to work with allies to ensure a humanitarian corridor providing safe passage for Afghans and assist with resettlement. Previous commitments have put Canada's refugee resettlement target for Afghanistan at 20,000. Most Ontario students have returned to the classroom, with some still learning virtually as a result of the hybrid model. Staff and students grade 1 and up will be required to wear masks indoors and will have to self-monitor before entering schools. But Ontario's back-to-school plan is being criticized by some for its lack of details. So while the plan is 29 pages long, it doesn't go in depth on an outbreak plan. The province also says it won't keep track of vaccination status of individual students. We're 2 years into a pandemic, and this is not what many had hoped for in terms of back-to-school certainty, especially because students in Ontario, they've been out of school longer than kids in any other province in this country. Despite calls from parents, teachers' unions, and members of the opposition at Queen's Park, the Ford government still hasn't mandated vaccines for educators and students over 12. For months, several groups, parents, advocates, and community members have called on the government to adopt measures including smaller class sizes, mandatory indoor masking, better ventilation in schools, and mandatory vaccination for those eligible, just to name a few things. Sandra is an Ontario parent advocate. She's part of the York Communities for Public Education. She's also a strong advocate for safe reopening of schools for students. She has a son who's going to the 4th grade and who hasn't been back at school since March 2020. Sandra, thank you so much for being here. You're a parent of a 9-year-old. His name is Ashton. Like you, I also have a child that's entering the 4th grade. I've got 2 younger ones, and I think a lot of parents feel the same way, where we want the kids to go to school, but at the same time, we're scared. They're all under 12, they're unvaccinated. So tell me a bit about how you're feeling with Ashton heading into 4th grade this year.
When we first decided to keep him at home, at the time, I thought it's really, really dangerous for him to be there, and to have less contact with others at that time was ideal. Now, flash forward to about 19 months into this pandemic, I am not feeling confident in schools right now. I don't feel that schools are addressing the safety protocols well.
What would make parents like you and your community feel more comfortable to send your kids to school?
I mean, in an ideal world, I would love to have smaller class sizes so that my kid can properly social distance. Current public health is saying, no large gatherings. School's a large gathering. So why are we asking our children to go in these indoor settings without being able to social distance? These are children, and children under 11, they're not great at social distancing from the get-go. So to say that I'm worried is beyond what I'm feeling right now.
Maybe if we could take a step back to how we got to this point, because virtual learning, some kids can thrive on that, some kids just can't do well. How was Ashton?
He had a really hard time because he had to adjust to the fact that he wasn't going to be seeing his classmates in person. As the year progressed, just before Thanksgiving, the board decided to implement hybrid, which is simultaneous learning. So in-person students, along with remote students, were being taught at the same time with one teacher. This caused immense emotional distress to my child. The board had said that this particular situation would allow for community building. I did not see that happen. In fact, it did the opposite. It separated the class into 2 different streams, one being in class and the other being online. Neither classes could truly intermingle. And I could see that the teacher was struggling immensely. She was not given the proper tools. There's really no handbook. There's no best practices for this kind of learning or teaching. And so my son felt very isolated from all the other students, from his teacher, sometimes ignored, not at the faults of the teacher, but frankly, how do you try to engage in-class students at the same time as engaging online students? It's near to impossible. Children cannot see their teachers' faces because they're masked and they're in class. It's doing more harm than it is good. Just putting a teacher in front of a camera, masked, and saying, here you go, here's your school show, it's not fair. It's not fair to teachers. It's not fair to kids. It's not fair to families. So, as a parent, I feel that I've been put in between a rock and a hard place. Does my kid need to go on for another year online when his mental health is already deteriorating to the point where he's crying? He's crying to me at night. He's scared to go back, but he wants to go back. And so, as a parent, I'm making these decisions without knowing the full gamut of the safety protocols at school. Even though I've been asking over and over and over again, I don't want my child online. I don't. It's not the best way to learn. We know that.
You've been very critical of the Premier and the Minister of Education in the past. Why is that? How has the government failed you and your son?
I just feel that, this government hasn't sat down with the proper stakeholders, and that includes parents, teachers, students, about how their lives are going to look. And there's a lot of shadow play. There's a lot of well, look at this shiny thing here. We're going to give you $200 towards your child's education, but we're not really going to help you keep them safe. We're not going to help you keep them well educated.
If Premier Ford or the Minister of Education were watching right now, what would you say to them?
Let's have a conversation. Let's have a true conversation. Let's sit down. Let's work together to come up with some really creative, powerful solutions. Because what we're seeing now is top-down mentality, and we don't need that. We need to come up with some really, really clear guidelines as to how to keep our kids safe. And you can't do that unless you have the buy-in from parents. I prepare my son for most things that he's going to encounter. He had said to me not too long ago, maybe a few nights ago, he came to me and said, "Mom, I really need a hug." And I said, "Of course. Are you feeling okay?" He said, "I'm really worried about school." And I said, "Well, what are you worried about?" He said, "I don't know if I'm going to be safe in school." That was really hard for me to hear because as a mom, I couldn't actually tell him, "Don't worry, it's going to be okay. Other people are looking out for you at school. Mommy's doing everything I can to make sure it goes well." But I felt like I was lying to him when I said, "Things will be okay," right? He can't get vaccinated, and it's really difficult to lie to my kid, right? And grown-ups around him are lying to him. Status quo is what the public health offices are giving us, right? So this is the bare minimum you should be doing. Well, why are we allowing bare minimum for our children? Mm-hmm. I know that funding is not there from the governments, but why not? Why aren't boards actually pushing back to say, our students are not going to be safe? I just hear school boards pushing parents saying, you have the choice. You can send your child into school or they can go online. But those options aren't really good options either.
It's not
way.
much of a choice.
Really is not much of a choice.
And I feel myself getting emotional, and I think a lot of parents feel the same way because it's been years, right? Mm-hmm. Parents are broken, kids are broken, the system is broken, and your message to the Premier and the Education Minister is quite optimistic, I find, which is let's keep talking. But the fact is, people have been talking to them for quite some time. They've been telling them what they need to do. And do you feel that some of that has fallen on deaf ears?
Absolutely. I mean, I think that when we're looking at Premier Ford and the Minister of Education, Stephen Lecce, they love doing this song and dance, and it's like, oh, look at me, I'm going to give you a little bit of this or a little bit of that. That's not what parents need. I have watched Stephen Lecce, and he's an extremely eloquent speaker. I will give him that. Bravo. However, I don't need sweet talk. I need the goods. I need action, actionable items, and they're not happening. just talking and saying that you're going to provide HEPA filters in every school and in every classroom, that's all nice and dandy. But when I call my principal and she tells me that she can't tell me about whether or not there's HEPA filters in the school, that actually alarm bells went off. And I will admit, my heart just like sank right into my stomach, thinking that my child, who is 9, who has no defense against COVID, he doesn't even have a HEPA filter in his classroom. His windows don't open. So how am I supposed to protect him? And, we're seeing private schools getting rapid tests, but publicly funded students are not. And why is that? Because I think there's no will for this government to provide safe environments for publicly funded education without children being in school in a safe environment where mothers feel their children are being taken care of and well taken care of. We can't go to work, right? It's really difficult. It's really difficult for us as mothers to know that our kids are not safe. I'm fully vaccinated. My husband's fully vaccinated. My child is the only one that's not vaccinated, and I'm letting him go into a school full of other students that are not vaccinated. That scares me. That scares me, and it makes me angry too. Because why are mothers being told that they don't matter enough? Don't we pay taxes? Don't we also contribute to society in a large way? We're a large part of this workforce. And without proper measures to ensure that our children are being taken care of, how can we comfortably, confidently continue to work either? And I'm here to tell parents, your voice does matter. Boards may tell you that your voice doesn't matter, but your voice is so strong.
So this is all about keeping your kid, for keeping kids safe at school. Do you trust that the premier is up for that job?
I will say no. I think he's about saving money, right? I just don't trust him. So I'm hugely disappointed, and I don't think that the premier understands parents. I don't really think he understands the kind of distress that we're going through, because it's not just a simply, should I send my kid to school or not? It is about, is it safe, right? They weren't leaning towards, elderly and seniors, right? And now we have another vulnerable sector, our children, who really have no say. They don't have a voice. They really don't. They don't matter because they aren't taxpayers or voters. I don't think that he really cares. And if he did, I think that the return to school would have looked extremely different. They keep using that word resilient. Well, kids are resilient, yes, when they know there's supports around them and there are people and things to help them. But when you're being put into a situation your mom doesn't even know, what to tell you, what to expect, how is that kid going to be resilient, right? I really hope that Stephen Lecce can understand that resilience doesn't come just from oneself. It comes from community. It comes from adults, responsible adults, that realize that there is safety issues, that there are risks to our kids, and to do something about it as a responsible adult. But we need the entire community And that includes boards, that includes trustees, that includes the Minister of Education. I don't think it's too late, but the time is ticking.
Sandra, thank you so much for joining us here today, and I wish you and your family all the best as the school year gets underway.
Thank you.
Thank you for joining us. This has been Uninvited Working Ontario Women News. Now over to you for a segment that we call I'm Speaking, where we hear from everyday Ontarians who want to speak out about issues impacting their lives without being interrupted or misrepresented. If you have something to say, record your 60-second message at actwow.ca. Now, I'm speaking.
I'm speaking.
I have to
I'm
weigh
speaking.
in.
I'm speaking.
Have to
I'm
weigh
speaking.
in.
If you don't mind letting me finish,
Wait.
I'm speaking.
Hi, my name is Carla Sleep, and I'm a PSW, and I just started my 19th year, which is totally amazing in this profession right now. When I started 19 years ago, things were so different. We had the time to spend with our residents and with everything else, and now we are just absolutely exhausted every day. And it's not just the exhaustion from work. We're all mothers. We are mothers, we are grandmothers. We work all day. We're up usually by 4:45 in the morning to get ready for work. We come home, now it is 5 o'clock at night. I'm doing laundry, getting dinner ready, and it's exhausting. We all have families that we want to come home and spend time with. And right now, we just don't have the energy in us for what we are doing and what we are actually getting paid. It is extremely exhausting. But I want to say thank you to all the PSWs, all the healthcare aides, everyone that works in this field right now, because we all know the struggle. We know it's real, and we are all standing together as women, and we are making it work because we will. We will never give up, never. I want to say thank you to you all, and I just want to let you know we are all very grateful for all the work you've done. Thank you, and I hope you guys have a wonderful day.
My name is Teresa, and I live in Peterborough, Ontario. Something that I just read that I'm sure most people are aware is that the minimum wage is being increased on October the 1st, a whole 10 cents. 10 cents. Yeah, no, I don't think so. That's almost insulting. Minimum wage is not cutting it. It is just not cutting it at all in this economy. We're all aware of how much housing is costing. We're all aware how much people are trying to scrape together to pay for rental, to pay for groceries, to pay for essentials. Minimum wage, oh my goodness, it's a joke. People need to be able to have a decent wage coming in to be able to live with dignity in this society.
My name is Gloria Turney, and I want to talk. So, my topic for Let's Talk is, why should any worker here in Ontario work without a pension? It's very demeaning that you should put in 20, 30, 40 years for some people who are working in healthcare or other industries who don't have a pension. You work all these years, and at retirement, you go home to whatever you might have been able to save. In my opinion, every worker in Ontario should have pension. Pension should be made mandatory. What can we do? How can we lobby this government to ensure that every worker has a pension? Thank you.
I'm Leah, and I live in Belleville, Ontario. I also work in mental health and addictions, and what's important to me is affordable housing. I see too many families struggling to make ends meet, trying to find a place to live, people getting evicted, landlords jacking up rent prices so that people can afford to move, even though they're being forced to move. More and more people are living on the streets. We have more and more people coming in to places like where I work, trying to find, places to live, and people are living in vans and on the streets and couch surfing, and it's getting worse every single day. Something needs to be done about it. And now it's only going to get worse. Working people don't even have places to live. People trying to find jobs who don't have addresses can't. It's something needs to be done about this, and now. And I think the Ford government needs to address this as soon as possible, and every government thereafter, because it's a problem and it's only getting worse.
I'm Ashley Hill and I'm from Thunder Bay. And one of the big issues that I see within our province that the government really needs to step up and make sure that everybody in this province has affordable housing. If you are working for minimum wage and you happen to be a single mother and you have to raise 2 children on a single wage, and this happens, and it's not because people make choices that lead them to work minimum wage forever. It's because they've made a choice and then something's happened. So making $15 an hour, you're making $2,000 a month. $1,400 a month rent here in Thunder Bay isn't going to leave you with much. It's going to leave you with $800, and that's for transportation, technology, food, and your other bills, your hydro, your water, your insurance, which is necessity. I don't understand how the province expects women to get anywhere and raise these children any better than being less than. We cannot afford to go any further in this world. In 2021, we need to understand that affordable housing is a government issue. Having affordable housing and more access to safe housing is going to keep our children and is going to keep our province growing strong and healthy. Because when you cut healthy places to live, you end up with more people in your ERs at the end of the day. When you cut from those programs, everything ends up in your healthcare system. Please understand that. We need women to be able to afford good food and good lifestyles for their children. And that all starts with the basic need of housing, Mr. Ford. Housing.